Did you know that BDSM and kink are healthy outlets for aggression, imagination, and attention? Hi, and welcome to the Partition, home of kinky wellness. My name is Dana Slosser, and I'm a sexual wellness coach that dives deep into all things kinky. I'm here to show how BDSM and kink deserves a rightful spot within the sexual wellness conversation. So, let's talk about it. Hello, and welcome back to the Partition podcast, joined by Miss Katrina Fairhurst.
Hello.
Today, we are going to be talking about our experiences and the influences of sex in the film and media and what that's had on us. So we can go ahead and jump right into it. So Katrina, what was your first exposure to sex in media?
So I think mine was probably movies more than anything. So I can't remember the first one, but no, wait, yes, I do. Because it's a really weird one to say, but there was an the old school kids movies that were PG. So my mum used to work in a video store back before when Blockbuster was still a massive thing. So I used to watch all the random movies there, but there was one that was called Dracula Undead. It had a piss take on Dracula.
I haven't seen it. No, I don't know it.
Oh my God,
I have to watch it then.
I will, honestly, it just takes the piss out of it so much. It's from the same guys who did the airplane movies and stuff like that. So it's that kind of adult theme, but it was a kids movie. And then I rewatched it a few years ago and I was like, this is not a fucking kids movie. With the brides, they redid the bit where the brides come in and Jonathan has sex with them. And I didn't understand what the grinding was all for, but yeah, that was my first thing of sex was watching them basically have sex.
Well,
I'm being huh.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Honestly, I haven't heard of it, but I love the movie Airplane. So
it's so funny. But yeah, what about you? What was your first exposure to them?
Actually, it was film as well, movies. My dad he wasn't good at choosing age-appropriate movies. For instance, Speed was one of my favorite movies, and I was 2, and that was the word I would say, Keanu, and run around. I don't really remember any graphic scenes from Speed, I guess, but I do know the first time that I saw a topless woman that really struck out to me was the movie Swordfish with Halle Berry and Hugh Jackman. Because I think I was 9 when I saw that film. And she's topless and she's reading a book and she just puts it down. And she was so casual about it. And I remember kind of being yeah, that's casual. I have it. I didn't talk to anybody about it, but I think that was the first real influence of me being sex should be more casual. Our looks should be more casual. Obviously on a much less complex term, I didn't understand it until I got older, but the whole concept of men never having to wear a shirt and women always having to wear a shirt. So this particular scene, and on top of that, Hugh Jackman and Halle Berry the year before were in X-Men. So I was obsessed with them anyways at that point. So yeah, I don't know. It was really Swordfish, I think. Plus she was hot. Hot.
I was gonna, because it's the one where she's got the short hair, isn't it?
Yes.
No, I know exactly where it is. God, if I actually sit down and think about half the movies I've saw, I'll be I really did have a thing for the butch look. But no, I know what you mean. It's really that casualness of nudity with women, I think, is such a massive thing, because you don't really understand it, because obviously as girls we were always told you can't do this, you have to wear a top, you have to be covered, and then to actually see this just casual nudity, not sexualized, must have been it's such a pivotal poignant moment of understanding our bodies are amazing.
On my grandma, on my mom's side, they were religious there, so the whole idea of what a woman looks like is completely different. The conservative, just always be modest, just dress modestly, I guess, don't dress too provocatively. Even that, they would make comments if something was for instance, my dad thought it would be a funny idea to put me in a Budweiser shirt when I was small, and it was a slit up the back and all this jazz, and I just remember my mom being hell to the no, hell to the no. What is this? But when you saw sex on film, did anyone talk about it with you?
I don't really remember it like being talked to. Like obviously in school I had sex education, but it was such a like very much this is what a man and a woman do, blah 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 blah. And like my parents, like me and my sister actually have a joke that like, because this is how we remember it. We don't remember having an actual sex sit down talking about sex. Like our parents never gave us that. They're always very open about it. But my stepdad did like to play the Bad Touch a lot by the Bloodhound Gang. So for us, that was our version of a sex talk from us, from my dad.
No, I have the same story. It was Let's Talk About Sex, Baby by my dad. He picked me up after a piano lesson and just put that on. And we just sat in silence while this song was on blaring. And it's just, that was it. I don't remember ever talking about sex with my mom, but my sis or my dad's sister once when I was older gave me really good advice. She said, know the difference between love and lust. And at the time, I didn't take those words to heart. I think it just flew over my head. I was just a teenager, just angry at the world. But yeah, the older I got, those words really sunk in, and especially now with my line of work, they could not be more relevant. So I don't know. I just thought that was always good. But no, my mom never sat us down. No one sat us down for sex. I don't ever remember anybody doing that.
So like my mom's always been really open about it. So I think like my sister used to sit down and explain stuff to me. So I was like with the whole Bad Touch, like, I didn't understand the bit of like, you know, you stick your hands down my pants and I think, guess you'll feel nuts. I didn't get that, but my sister had to explain it. And I think the conversations kind of changed from when I was a child more to when I was a teenager, when we started having it, especially when like before I came out, it wasn't that surprising when I did come out, because I like any form of like queer movie I could get my hands on, I was obsessed with. So I loved the movie Debs, which was the first time and one of the only times actually that I've seen like lesbians where it's like a lesbian movie that's actually a fucking comedy. Like so many of the movies are either period dramas or just very depressing, whereas like, and then I think that's when the conversation started, where it was just like, not necessarily, obviously not explaining to me how queer people have sex, but just this really like, you know, if you are, nobody cares. But I do remember like the teenage movies of like with sex and sexuality, there was such a big push on the virginity angle. Like, you know, everything was about this girl needs to lose her virginity. Oh, she's going to be a social pariah. Oh no. Or it's like, you know, she wants to lose it with the boy she loves. And like, that was I always remember like me and mum having a conversation about that, because even in school, sex education still really pushes that don't have sex unless you're in a relationship, don't have sex until you love someone. But my mum actually, instead of saying don't wait until when you lose your virginity, it's not about whether you love somebody, but wait until you trust somebody.
Yeah.
And I think considering like, you know, the way I lost my virginity, and I genuinely did feel like I trusted this person and that trust got broken. But it was such a poignant, like, it's such a thing that's always stuck with me, because I was like, yeah, like as an adult, it makes complete sense to be like, there is a difference between, you know, I'm in a relationship with somebody and I care about this person, and I'm in a relationship with somebody and I trust this person to stop, to listen to me, to kind of, and it, you know, it's a really interesting kind of way of describing being with somebody that it's just always stuck with me when it comes to it. And it is an interesting one that like trust is never something that's shown within romantic relationships. You're immediately expected to trust somebody 100%, especially when you look at like movies and stuff. The guy falls in love and it's, oh my God, everything. And you're like, no, trust is built. Like,
yeah, I feel like with movies, when it comes to sex, it's more on the attraction side.
Yeah.
Like it's very much like, does this person physically attract to this other person? That's it. And then it's a passionate one. Like that was really the predominant style of sex that I witnessed. Well, growing up, I watched a lot of like James Bond, Mission Impossible, 007. So these macho men that would come in and like pick up these younger women, and they're super passionate. And it was just everything fell into place right away on the first try. There was no laughter. And now I see sex has so much laughter. There's so much funny moments in it, and brief pauses, and like water checks, and like, oh, you're on my hair, or this, like move over, or this and that. So yeah, I think that was the biggest difference for sure.
Yeah, I think like the predominant style of sex, like, especially when you talk about like from the spy, it's always this like passionate thing that, like you said, like, or like this whole thing of there's no conversation before. There's no like, they look, and the look tells them they're all gonna have sex, and then they go at it, and you're like, that is not what it is. Like,
oh, not even close.
I would say that had that like idea that like, sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, that like, it was going to be this charged moment. Even the first kiss, it's like, this charged non-talking moment where they get into it. And I remember as a teenager, like dating and being like, why isn't this happening? Like, why is there? And like, even now as an adult, I still have this bad habit of not asking for things, because I'm like, I thought I was given all the signals that it was okay to go. And it's like, no, you actually can say to people like, are you going to kiss me? Or do you want to kiss me?
Yeah. Or can you kiss me like this passionate way out of this scene in this movie?
Yeah. Or like with sex, that awkward, like you said, they never show that awkwardness of like, when, oh, am I doing it right? Oh, we've both gone at the same time, but we're in the way. Like, yeah, I think it really kind of sets your expectations for sex so high.
Yeah. And then, sorry to cut you off. It also sets the weirdness expectation of what happens after sex. Like the moment when things are done and you have to go clean up or grab something or put clothes on or something. Like, I just love how every movie that I've seen, like, it's just a guy jumping into a pair of jeans and his belt's obviously on, and that's it. That's all. That's it. He's done clean. I'm like, what? Oh my God, not even close. But of course it's entertainment. But yeah, because I didn't have any conversations. Again, yeah, you find yourself being like, isn't that the way it's supposed to be?
Yeah. And I think also, or like that whole bit on the aftermath as well, it cuts to black. It's like it fades to black, and the next minute it's like them in bed together, still cuddled up, and you're like,
the sheet is up at the shirt level. Like, all of a sudden it's like right here. Who holds their sheet up to their chest like that? Nobody.
No, but like there's no like, she's had to run out of bed to quickly go and pee so she doesn't get a UTI.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Trying to like take the condom off and not spill anything. And also, I think what's an interesting one from our conversation, when you start asking like, what is the most predominant style of sex that you witness? Heterosexual sex.
Yes.
Very rarely do they show, or did they show, because it has changed over the past few years, like gay sex, like gay male sex. I think the only time I've seen lesbian sex, because it still fades to black, or it's still like, the head's down there, but you don't actually see them doing anything. If you actually look, it looks more like they're turned into the leg. Very rarely do you actually see like LGBTQ or just queer sex in general, that is done in a way that isn't pornographic.
Well, yeah. Well, I was going to say, to add to your point, I saw a breakdown of, I did a media studies class, and it was a sex scene from Boys Don't Cry. And that rating, they got a higher rating than a heterosexual same sex scene. They basically did a side by side of it, but the Boys Don't Cry got a higher rating because of their sex scene, even though it shouldn't have been. Like, in my opinion, a higher rating. So, well,
it's a really interesting one, because like, the minute there's any form of like LGBT, and especially in the past, you have these movies like that are 18s and are like barely has anything in it. It's just, you just see like a couple in bed. And then at the same time, you've got movies that are so extremely violent and like to the point of being like, teenagers shouldn't be watching, like you shouldn't be letting teenagers,
or even TV, the TV shows. I hear such terrible scenes out of, like, I know Game of Thrones has a few, like Sons of Anarchy has a massive one. But yeah, like in Sons of Anarchy, there's a rough scene there, like, but these are just TV shows that anyone can just turn on.
Yeah, and like the time of day as well, like queer, like you think, what was it, Channel 4 in the UK is very known for having these like these kind of different like kind of shows. Queer as Folk, you used to have to wait until like 10 o'clock until you could watch your episode of Queer as Folk.
Oh, wow.
You could watch like Hollyoaks, which would have every few seasons there will be a massive so it's not trigger warning for CNC, I say trigger warning for sexual assault. So many sexual assault storylines, and it's like hardcore ones that you see, or like you have it very, very graphically implied as to what has happened to like the victim.
Women, though, it's mostly women.
Yeah, it's mostly women. And then when it comes, and like people are fine with that. The minute it happens, people are fine. And then when you do see, like, I think the only time I've ever seen like something that was like a hardcore, or like not even hardcore, but like an explicit gay scene was in Blue is the Warmest Color, which I still think is creepy. I've never watched that movie.
I didn't seen it.
Sex scene. I have a thing about age gaps. I'm like, why when they show like queer, like when they say things are meant to be good queer representation, why does it have to have such a high, like massive age gap between like a 16-year-old and a 20-odd-year-old? I'm like, it's still grooming. But so I ended up, I watched the sex scene. We've all Googled on YouTube.
Everybody looks up sex scenes, you know, sex sells, sex matters.
It does. And it was the most, it didn't look realistic at all. Like, yeah, okay, they had different like positions and that and stuff, but it wasn't good. Like everybody makes out that this is meant to be like the hottest scene ever. And I watched it and I was like, if somebody tongued my vagina like that, I think I would like curl up and die. Just weird. But like, don't get me wrong though, like there is starting to become like a lot as people become more diverse, as people are looking for more diversity within their shows and movies, TV more than movies, to be completely honest. I think we are starting to see like better sex scenes and like interesting sex scenes that are hot and make sense. And like you said, like, you know, Sex Education on Netflix shows laughter during sex and stuff like that. And I think that's an amazing thing to see.
Well, I think representation has definitely increased over the last few years from what I've seen, for sure. Like I don't know. Have you seen the show Sense8? I haven't finished it.
Yes.
But yes, I thought the representation in that show was beautiful. Like I just, first of all, it's beautifully filmed. All of the whole thing. If anyone hasn't seen Sense8, go out and watch it. It's so good. But I thought that was a great, great show.
And I thought like the way that they showed sex and sexuality within it was amazing as well. Like the way that, like, obviously because of the connection, they all have sex and like it's hot as well, let's be completely honest.
Oh my god. But even with like media and TV, like sex obviously is in our advertisements. And I was thinking about some of the conversations that we've had, and as much as movies were, advertisements on sex must have been an influence, even though I don't have any examples off the top of my head. But when I look around at how much sex is in advertisements right now, and I see that little kids are wandering around looking at this, and I think to myself, it must have an impact on them. So it must have had an impact on me. But sex is everywhere and kids just see it. They see it like when they walk down the malls, outside of a mall, magazines, when they're in the grocery stores. Even if you try to hide them from, say, TV or shows, you can't hide it forever.
No. Like, I think, what is it, like perfume adverts are probably some of the most sexual things I've ever seen.
Yes, actually, perfume is a great example on that.
Like what, and another one that's quite interesting is like obviously from like the BDSM and like a kink kind of perspective, is the way that advertisers have taken aspects of that and added it into advertising as well. So it's kind of like people are going to be introduced to the idea of BDSM and introduced to the idea of kink, whether they intended to or not. Like the amount of fashion ones I've seen where, like, you know, they've got the collars or the harnesses,
even the ties, like they'll use regular everyday items for that, like a girl pulling on a tie of something that the high heel between the legs on the chair, the sultry seduction secretary. Yeah, like it is everywhere. So like I guess you can't get away with it. I think that's why if you have children, I think it's a responsibility to have that conversation with them as well. Like it just comes with the territory, and especially about advertisements and the importance of how advertisements can shape it, not just with sex, but just in everything.
Oh God, yeah. Like I think some of I did when I was at law school, I actually did one that was like sex, gender, sexuality and the law. And we actually did look at the way sex is portrayed within advertising and the way that like gender is portrayed within it. So like if you look at I think it's PETA, or like it's one of the big animal charities, and so much of their advertising is like they're very weird with their adverts. So it's like, you know, anti-eating animals, fine, completely understand, but they over sexualize and kind of, there's like one advert they've done which is like they've over sexualized and created torture porn with the fact that it is like an image of like a woman tied up, cut to pieces, and obviously people complained about it and were like, wow. One, it's a really graphic advert, and two, it's a really interesting thing that you have, you know, in a time where people are talking about the female body, you have literally reduced the female body down to something sexual and just pieces of meat, like the literally. Way you done, yeah, literally, in a way that just like it doesn't kind of add up to what today's views are. So it's a really interesting one.
Well, that's the point of like, it's like there's representation and why it matters, but it's how it's represented as well. Yeah. Like I believe that there shouldn't be a monopoly on anything that like sexuality, sex, genders, people. TV needs to be as different and unique as the current real world that we live in. And if people see themselves on TV, then they feel less alone. So I do think that that's good, but it's good to open up the conversation of like bringing in representation. Like I saw that Ariel, like that viral thing that's going around. Those little girls were so excited, and it's just so cute. Like it's so cute. And also it makes it so, on a sexuality point, if you see another lesbian or gay couple, you don't feel so there's nothing wrong with me. Like, oh, like I see it. Like I'm not weird. Like no one's weird for being that, but like there's you can think that if you don't know it.
Yeah, like I would completely agree. So I would say like I said, when I was a teenager, I consumed, like when I was figuring out my sexuality, when I was trying to work out, I watched a lot of movies that were adult movies that were not for kids, because that was the only time I saw representation. And it's a really interesting one when like we're coming from a time when, like, you know, the 90s, early noughties, where there were laws in place that kind of, when it came to TV series, dictated how certain sexualities were seen within the media, whether or like, you know, the people either has to be a saint or so very like, because I like rom-coms, like I'll be honest and say it, I love a good rom-com, I love funny movies, and it was really interesting to me where like it's not until recently that we've only just started to have that's not like, you know, in like queer spaces that aren't indie movies. So like that Bros that's coming out this week, I think Fire Island was an amazing one. I didn't like the lesbian one, I'll be honest and say it. I just did not like the storyline. The Christmas one that came out, with Kristen Stewart, I watched it and I was like, if this was an interracial straight couple, it would straight up be called abusive, is all I'm saying.
Okay, so there's so many movies I feel like I have to watch. Yeah, what's the concept of it?
I forget the name of it, but I'll send it to you afterwards. But for me, representation is when we can have these types of like funny movies. They haven't got to be true stories. They haven't got to be these poignant, depressing as fuck period dramas, or like always talking about history. And I'm like, you know, I think the worst thing they ever did as representation within queer history was obviously Stonewall, where they like whitewashed Stonewall, which was awful. If you're going to talk about history, talk about history from the actual factual truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also I think like when we are talking about sex and we're talking about the types of sex and stuff like that, the representation of it matters, and like you have to do it in a way that is you can have it be fun but not be disrespectful. So like there's a TV series, I liked it. It's called Bonding. So it's it's on Netflix. I know that it got a lot of flack because it's not the best at talking about BDSM and BDSM relationships and stuff like that. But it was for me personally, as somebody who isn't a practitioner, it was a very interesting way of actually like not shaming people for being interested in different kinks and fetishes, starting the conversation about like, you know, dungeons and where people can actually go to enjoy stuff. And I thought like it's a really interesting thing when you're like, actually they made a show specifically to say this type of sex is happening as well. These people are like, there is nothing wrong with these people. This is what they enjoy. When you've also got like, you know, with representation, it's you can't have it and then also demonize people for enjoying it. So like it's, you know, if we're talking about like the use of BDSM within like perfume adverts and within advertising,
or even like the sex in the advertisements that we have in the article there.
Yeah, like the implication of sex, and then at the same time clutch your pearls and then be angry that people are actually, or not angry, but scandalized that people are interested in this type of sex. You know, you can't sit here and take the bits that you think are photogenically interesting, like, you know, having a man on his knees as a woman dominates him. You can't sit there and have that and be like, this is empowerment for this perfume. And then when people say, yeah, I know, because I get off on doing that, go, how dare you? That is a dirty thing to do. Like, you don't get to shame people when you are literally taking these things and creating them. Give me a moment. I'm just going to close my window.
No worries. To add to your point, I think it's a good segue into the article that we had. So Kat and I read an article previously about the opinions of sexualizing gay advertisements. For instance, one of the examples was in Burger King in Austria a few years ago, gave people the option of ordering a burger bun with 2 top buns or 2 bottom buns. It received a lot of, at the time, a lot of hate for it, but honestly, I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. I don't understand why that ad got a lot of hate. I do think that I would want to try it. Even it's a food item, like, you know what I mean? Like it's a food thing too. I don't understand. And again, to add to your point, like people cherry pick what they want, and then like the Cottonelle flushable wipes.
Yeah.
Again, I agree that in the article it said that gay men are not the only ones having anal sex. And it's true. So why are we up in arms over about that commercial as well?
Yeah, it's a really like, because a lot of it was based around the Pride advertising, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The article. So like, don't get me wrong. I do understand from a queer perspective, I can sit here and say like, one thing, it does annoy me when big brands around Pride, like particularly pander toward, because it's not because they care about the community, it's because they want the pink pound. When it comes to Pride, because all of these adverts, the one theme that they had was they were all to promote Pride Month within the country that they were in. So I do understand it where people are like, when we talk about representation and sexuality in the media, I understand the queer community going, for fuck's sake, stop, like, you know, it's when you're doing nothing the rest of the year, stop advertising specifically for Pride Month just because you want the pink pound. I do understand that side of it. But at the same time, I saw those adverts. I thought they were funny. And at the exact same time as people were up in arms about these ones, people were going, you can't over-sexualize, like, you know, the idea of tops and bottoms, which are things that we talk about very often. You can't be up in arms about that when at the same time you have got mass advertisements about Viagra, about lube and condoms, and like there are a lot of heterosexual adverts out there. So at the same time, you can't say you want representation and that you want to be treated the same as heterosexual society, and then be angry when they have actually given you that by sexualizing you in the same way they sexualize.
Like if you're
fucking things.
If you're going to be included in this is what's going to be happening. Like that.
Like
suffer together. We will all be sexualized together. Like, that's the other thing too. It's never going to be 100% right. It can't. Yeah. And they're also selling. They're trying to sell. This is supposed to be that. I think people forget that this is their job, is to get you talking. But even with tops and bottoms, those terms are used within BDSM and kink, like as well. Like if you're dom or your sub, your top, your bottom, your master slave, your owner pet. Like I didn't think anything of it either, like those certain things.
No, I agree. I think the thing that I really liked was like when people were complaining about the sexualization, I really liked like what the two people at the end had to say. So Gross and Sender, I think it is, where they were talking about like, okay, they were weird adverts to see out of nowhere. Completely agree on that one. However, you can't sit there and clutch your pearls when we are like, from a queer perspective, we're a very sexual, that is a huge part of sexualization within community. I have very frank, open conversations about sex and sexuality within my own community than I do talking to a lot of my heterosexual friends. Because that's what we talk about. Like I've got friends that talk to me about like ass eating. You know, the guy had a really good quote where he basically said like, modern day queer community is a very sexualized place. You cannot clutch your pearls when we are doing it to ourselves at the same time. Like this is what we do. And also at the same time, I do think a lot of the people who kick off, it's fucking purity politics, which is the worst type of politics, in my opinion, where it is saying, oh my God, we all, like, they're the same people that try and say that like leather daddies and leather dykes and like kink and BDSM shouldn't be a part of shouldn't be a part of Pride. And it's like, well, you're literally ignoring huge parts of our community and
roots. There's roots there. That's history there. Like I saw an article too about the younger generation trying to exile that out, and it just, I shake my head because I just go, you don't even know like the pathways that your previous generations had to pave for you to be where you are now. That's ridiculous.
It is. And it's also like, I understand, like there's two sides of the argument, and at one point, like one side of it I do understand, but at the other point of it I'm like, it's bullshit. I understand when people are saying when there are kids around, blah blah blah, but I am like, one, Pride has never been for children. Whether if you are a teenager attending Pride, that is fine, but Pride is majority of the time, it is an adults event. They have, most of the time, they have fucking family areas specifically set up that, this is what it's like at London Pride. They have family areas set up for queer families, for straight families to bring their kids to come and get involved in Pride that is away from the drinking, away from the BDSM side of it. You know what I mean? Like that, like when people make this decision, but if you actively know this is the area that you're going to and you take your child, you cannot be surprised when people are there. In fact, they deserve to be there way more than you. You know what I mean? It's like purity politics. And it is that purity politics within kind of not even just at that side of it, but like when people are saying, oh no, you can't make jokes about this. Oh no, you can't make jokes about sex. You can't do things about that. And it's like, that's bullshit. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not a teenager. I'm not a child. I do not need to be fed parts of my community wrapped in cotton wool. Like, end of the day, people are going to fuck how they want to fuck. Let them fuck.
Yeah.
And also, because it's something you're not into doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. If you go there and it's like, you know, somebody is, to be honest, I can be honest and say this, like I've gone to many a Pride. The people who are in like the leather and the puppy play and like the kink, they are probably way more dressed than the little fucking twink in a crop top high off of E who has just come from the bathroom noshing off some older bloke for a drink. I'm like, do not sit here and say you cannot have this when you are doing that, because they're probably way more respectful about stuff than that person that is in the bathroom holding up a line in Pride, when
Yeah,
it is the busiest time, just because you want to get dick, just because you want to have what you consider vanilla dick.
Yeah, I just don't think they've done their homework enough. It's just now this is the new way and it's so shunful. It's like cancel culture within their own community. I don't get it. So
agreed. But I do think, like, with the whole thing, back to the article, I think end of the day, like, people, and I know it isn't just the community who are up in arms, unfortunately, like with everything, if there's any form of difference, there are so many straight people that get angry and kick off and go, oh, this is disgusting, blah, 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 blah. And then we'll happily ignore all of the sexualization of straight stuff within media as well.
I don't think they see it. I think they're so used to it that if they don't see it, and it's turned into like, it's blended into the background, because if you say it like straight is also sexualized, they'll argue on like, it's not that bad, not as bad. It's like, dude, you've seen it so many times, you're blind to it at this point.
Exactly. I think, and it is, the fact that it's the same sex couple is quite jarring. But I do think, it is an interesting one when you're like, it's so funny that people, for me, it was I liked the adverts. I thought they were hilarious. And maybe it is because it comes from like the marketing side and the comms side. Well, I have sat there and been like, okay, how are we going to, it's a very clever, like, it's very clever what they did. Like, I thought the Postmates one and the Uber Eats one of having the top and bottom menus are hilarious.
And apparently they might be making a straight menu. So for everyone listening, I'm going to put the article that we're talking about in the description. Make sure you read it and let us know what you think. But I think that's a wrap for us on Sex in the Media with Katrina and myself.
Yes, and it was great to be here.
Oh, well, it was lovely to have you, and we wish you the best, and bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for us. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and let us know what you think. You can find me at thepartition.life and Katrina at _satisfiedcat. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time. And as always, stay kinky.